Hey guys! Tonight we are going to stare into the dusty glass case of a Victorian curiosity cabinet to examine one of the strangest objects ever sold to a paying public. We are looking at the Mermaid, but not the one with the flowing red hair and the singing voice that you might remember from animated movies. This mermaid is brown, leathery, and smells faintly of old varnish and dried fish. It is small, shriveled, and looks remarkably like a dehydrated monkey stitched onto a salmon, which, as it turns out, is exactly what it is. You probably believe this kind of obvious hoax wouldn't fool anyone for more than 5 minutes. But in the gaslit halls of the 19th century, this grotesque little creature convinced doctors, naturalists, and thousands of ticket-buying citizens that the ocean was full of tiny, angry humanoids. Before you get too comfortable and possibly fall asleep halfway through, tap like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this odd mix of boredom and history. It keeps the channel alive and the stories just sleepy enough to help you drift off again next time. Also, go ahead and let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It is always nice to know who is drifting off with us. Now, dim the lights, let the world outside grow quiet, and turn on a fan if you like that soft, steady hum in the background. Let your shoulders loosen and your breathing slow. This is your time to drift. No rush, no deadlines, no noise. Just you, a little warmth in the air, and the faint whisper of history waiting to unfold. So, settle in, and let's ease gently into tonight's journey together. You are standing at the edge of a narrow, unpaved street in the city of Edo, the place that will one day be known to the world as Tokyo. The year is somewhere in the early 19th century, though the exact date is difficult to pin down because the rain has washed away the passage of time, leaving only the gray, rhythmic drumming of water against wood. The sky above is a heavy, charcoal blanket of clouds that sit low over the rooftops, pressing the city into a cozy, damp silence. It is evening, or perhaps late afternoon, the light failing early due to the storm, casting the world in shades of slate and indigo. You can feel the moisture in the air, a cool, clinging dampness that settles on your skin and makes the heavy cotton of your clothes feel pleasantly substantial. You begin to walk down the street, your feet navigating the wet earth. The ground here is packed dirt, turned dark and soft by the hours of steady rainfall. Puddles reflect the dim glow of paper lanterns that are just beginning to flicker to life in the doorways of the low wooden buildings lining the road. There is a specific sound to this place, a hush that is unique to a city made almost entirely of wood and paper. The rain does not slap against concrete or asphalt. It thuds softly against thatched eaves and cedar shingles, a muted, organic percussion that seems to absorb sound rather than scatter it. You pass a row of merchant houses, their sliding doors drawn shut against the weather. Behind the translucent paper screens, you can see the vague, warm outlines of people moving inside, shadows shifting in the orange light of oil lamps. But out here, you are alone with the rain. The air smells of wet pine, charcoal smoke from cooking fires, and the distinct, salty tang of the sea, which is never far away in this river-laced city. It is a savory, earthy scent, grounded and calm. You pull your collar up slightly against a stray gust of wind, but it isn't a biting cold. It is merely a fresh, brisk reminder of the season. You are looking for a specific workshop, a place that does not advertise its wares to the general public. It is not a shop for buying rice or silk or tea. It is a place of mezzamano, of things made to be looked at, things made to wonder over. You turn a corner into an alleyway that is even narrower than the main street, the eaves of the houses on either side nearly touching overhead, creating a dry tunnel where the rain only drips from the edges of the roof tiles. At the end of this alley stands a small, unassuming structure. The wood of the sliding door is aged, the grain raised and silvered by decades of weather. There is no sign, only a small cedar ball hanging from the eaves, darkened by soot and time. You reach out and slide the door open. It moves with a heavy, rolling rumble on its wooden track, a sound that vibrates through your hand. You step inside and slide it shut behind you, instantly cutting off the sound of the wind and replacing the wet, cool air with the dry, still atmosphere of the workshop. The room is dim, lit only by a pair of floor lanterns and a small brazier where a few coals glow with a steady, low heat. The air here is thick with dust, not the grime of a neglected room, but the clean, dry dust of wood shavings, dried herbs, and old paper. It smells of glue made from fish bladder, sharp and pungent, mixed with the sweet aroma of drying lacquer. Your eyes adjust to the gloom, and you see that the space is cluttered but organized with the obsessive precision of a master craftsman. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with wooden boxes, rolled scrolls, and ceramic jars. Bundles of dried grasses hang from the rafters, rustling softly in the draft you created when you entered. In the center of the room, seated on a flat cushion on the tatami mat, is the artisan. He does not look up as you enter. He is a man of indeterminate age, his face lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from years of squinting at tiny details in poor light. He wears simple, indigo, dyed robes that are worn soft at the elbows. His hands are moving with slow, deliberate purpose over a low wooden worktable. You move closer, your footsteps silent on the woven straw mats, and sit quietly in the corner, watching him. He is preparing for a task that requires absolute stillness of mind. This is not a factory. There is no rush here. The concept of mass production feels alien in this space, where a single object might take weeks to complete. The artisan is arranging his materials. To his left, there is a wooden tray containing a collection of tools that look terrifyingly sharp. There are small knives with bamboo handles, their blades glinting in the lantern light. There are chisels no wider than a fingernail, and heavy iron shears that look strong enough to cut through bone. Next to the tools sits a small ceramic bowl filled with a thick, cloudy paste. This is rice glue, a simple adhesive that has held this country's carpentry and paper crafts together for centuries. It has a faint, starky smell that mingles with the fish glue, but your attention is drawn to the objects on his right. These are the raw materials for tonight's work, and they are strange, disjointed things. Lying on a piece of clean, white paper is the dried carcass of a monkey. It is small, perhaps a macaque, and it has clearly been dead for a very long time. It is not fresh. It has been desiccated, dried out until the skin is tight against the ribs, turning a dark, rich brown like old leather. The artisan has removed the lower half of the creature, leaving only the torso, the arms, and the head. The monkey's face is frozen in a grimace, lips pulled back to reveal tiny, sharp teeth. But in this quiet light, it doesn't look scary. It looks sad, fragile, and incredibly old. Next to the monkey lies a fish. It is a large specimen, perhaps a salmon or a carp, and it too has been dried. It is stiff and straight, its scales dull and gray, lacking the iridescent shimmer of a living creature. The fish has been decapitated, its body ending abruptly where the head used to be. The inside has been hollowed out, the flesh scraped away, leaving only the tough, parchment-like skin and the rigid spine. It sits there like a hollow sleeve, waiting to be filled. You watch as the artisan picks up a small brush and begins to clean the monkey's torso. He moves with the tenderness of a doctor tending to a patient. He brushes away invisible specks of dust from the dried skin, working the bristles into the crevices of the rib cage. He is preparing the surface, ensuring that nothing will interfere with the bond he is about to create. The sound of the brush against the dried skin is a dry, rasping whisper, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. Sha-ka-sha. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. Historians still argue whether these craftsmen created these creatures purely for profit, or if there was a deeper, spiritual motivation behind them. Some suggest that in a world filled with spirits and yokai, creating a physical representation of a water goblin was a way of honoring the unknown, a talisman against drowning or bad luck at sea. Others insist they were simply clever souvenirs made to confuse the Dutch traders confined to the trading post at Dejima, the only Westerners allowed in Japan at the time. The Dutch were known to pay handsome sums for natural wonders, and the artisans of Edo were more than happy to provide them with monsters that defied classification. But looking at the artisan now, focused entirely on the curve of the monkey's shoulder, it doesn't feel like a cynical scam. It feels like an act of creation. He is building a myth with his hands. He sets the brush down and picks up a small, curved pick. He begins to gently lift the edge of the fish's skin where it was cut. The skin is tough and unyielding, dried hard as plastic. He has to work it slowly, easing the pick underneath to separate the skin from the underlying structure, just enough to create a flap. He does not rush. If he pushes too hard, the ancient skin will crack, and the illusion will be ruined before it even begins. You can hear his breathing, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of the rain outside. The room feels incredibly small, a tiny bubble of warm light in a wet, dark city. The artisan pauses to dip a cloth into a bowl of warm water. He wrings it out until it is barely damp, and then drapes it over the cut edge of the fish. He needs to soften the material, just a fraction, to make it pliable enough to work with. Steam rises from the cloth, a tiny, curling wisp of white that vanishes into the shadows of the rafters. He waits. This is a job that consists mostly of waiting. Waiting for glue to dry, waiting for skin to soften, waiting for the wood to settle. You find yourself relaxing into this waiting. There is nowhere else to be. The storm outside has cut off the rest of the world. There is only this room, this table, and these strange, dried fragments of life. While the fish skin softens, the artisan turns his attention back to the monkey. He picks it up, holding the small, dried torso in both hands. He examines the interior. It is hollow, a shell of ribs and spine. He needs to build an internal structure to support the connection. He reaches for a block of wood, a piece of soft cedar that has been roughly hewn into a cylindrical shape. He places it inside the monkey's chest cavity, testing the fit. It is too large. He picks up his knife. The sound of the knife carving the wood is satisfyingly crisp. Scritch, scritch. Long, thin curls of pale wood fall onto the tatami mat. The smell of fresh cedar bursts into the air, bright and resinous, cutting through the dusty, fishy smell of the workshop. He carves with short, controlled strokes, shaving away millimeters of wood at a time. He checks the fit again. Still too tight. He carves more. You watch the pile of shavings grow, a small mountain of blonde wood accumulating by his knee. The repetition is soothing. It is the sound of progress, measured in shavings. He is making a plug, a connector that will bridge the gap between the mammal and the fish. It is hidden engineering, a piece of the puzzle that no one will ever see once the work is finished. The Victorian gentleman who will one day stare at this object through monocles will speculate about vertebrae and pelvic bones, never knowing that the creature's spine is actually a whittled piece of Japanese cedar. The artisan blows the dust off the wood and fits it into the monkey. It slides in perfectly, a snug friction fit. He nods, a microscopic gesture of satisfaction, and sets the monkey down. He removes the damp cloth from the fish. The skin has darkened slightly from the moisture and looks a little less rigid. He tests the edge with his thumb, pressing down to see if it yields. It does, it is ready. But he does not start joining them yet. He reaches for a small jar of charcoal powder. He needs to darken the wood he just carved, so that if anyone peers too closely through the gaps in the ribs, they won't see fresh, white timber. He dips a rag into the black powder and rubs it into the cedar block. The wood turns black, disappearing into the shadows of the monkey's hollow body. The level of detail is unnecessary, yet he does it anyway. This is the hallmark of the craft. It isn't enough to fool the eye from a distance. The object must hold up to scrutiny. It must feel real. The artisan wipes his blackened hands on a spare rag. He looks at the two halves of his creature. The monkey, with its human-like hands and expressive face, and the fish with its powerful tail and aquatic heritage. Separately, they are just biological remnants. But soon he will force them together, and in that joining, they will become something else entirely. They will become a story. You watch as he prepares the thread. He does not use standard cotton thread, which might rot or snap. He uses silk, strong and fine. He unwinds a length of it from a wooden spool. The silk is a dull, natural color, dyed to match the dried skin of the fish. He threads a needle, his eyes narrowing as he guides the fiber through the tiny eye. He pulls it through and knots the end. He places the needle on the table, the steel clicking softly against the wood. Everything is ready. The components are prepped. The tools are laid out. The glue is tacky. The rain continues to fall outside, a steady, relentless drone that seals the workshop off from time. You feel a heavy, pleasant weight in your limbs. The meticulous nature of the work, the slow movements of the artisan, the dim light. It all combines to pull you down into a state of deep, quiet observation. You are not waiting for a climax or a twist. You are simply watching a man work. He picks up the monkey torso in his left hand and the fish tail in his right. He brings them together. The wooden plug inside the monkey slides into the hollow opening of the fish. They meet in the middle. He twists them slightly, aligning the spine of the monkey with the dorsal line of the fish. It is a grotesque handshake between land and sea. He holds them there, his fingers clamping down to keep the alignment perfect. The creature is taking shape. It is about 2 feet long, a manageable size, small enough to fit in a box, big enough to cause a sensation. But it is not joined yet. It is merely held in place by the artisan's grip. He reaches for the needle with his free hand. This is the moment where the artifice begins in earnest. The stitching must be invisible. It must look like the natural fusion of skin and scale. He positions the needle at the very edge of the monkey's skin, just where the fur, if it had any left, would meet the scales. He pauses, taking a breath, centering himself before the first puncture. The workshop seems to get even quieter, if that is possible. The coals in the brazier settle with a soft rustle of ash. The shadows in the corners of the room stretch longer as the oil in the lanterns burns down. You are witnessing the birth of a lie, but it is a gentle lie, crafted with patience and skill. It is a lie that will travel thousands of miles, across oceans the artisan will never see, to lands he can only imagine. It will sit on velvet cushions and be discussed by men in wool coats. But for now, it is just wood, skin, and silence in a rainy room in Edo. The artisan pushes the needle through the tough skin. It takes effort. You can see the tendons in his hand stand out as he applies pressure. The needle pops through the other side. He pulls the thread taut. The first stitch is made. It is tiny, barely a millimeter long. He prepares for the next one. And the next. The work has begun. The atmosphere in the room is heavy with the scent of rain and old things. It is a safe, enclosed space, a place where the outside world cannot intrude. You watch the slow rhythm of the stitching. Push, pull, tighten. Push, pull, tighten. It is a lullaby of motion. The artisan's face is a mask of concentration, peaceful and absorbed. He is lost in the minutiae of his craft, and as you watch him, you feel yourself getting lost too, drifting on the slow, steady current of his work. The rain drums on, the shadows deepen. The mermaid is coming together, stitch by solitary stitch. You lean closer, your eyes tracing the path of the artisan's needle as it weaves between 2 worlds. The joining of the monkey to the fish is not a simple matter of sewing 2 edges together, like mending a tear in a shirt. It is a surgical procedure performed on long, dead patients who refuse to cooperate. The dried skin of the monkey is thick and stubborn, resisting the needle with a leathery toughness. The fish skin is brittle, prone to cracking if handled with anything less than absolute reverence. The artisan works with a rhythm that is almost meditative, a slow, deliberate cadence that seems to slow the passage of time itself. He inserts the needle into the monkey's flank, pushing hard until the metal pierces the hide. Then, with a deft twist of his wrist, he catches the edge of the fish skin, pulling the thread through both layers. He pulls the stitch tight, burying the thread deep into the texture of the skin so that it disappears from view. Tug, secure, repeat. Each stitch is a tiny victory of will over material. He is sewing a corset of silk around the creature's midsection, binding the mammal to the aquatic in a permanent embrace. Historians often marvel at the durability of these constructions. Some of these, mermaids, have survived for over 200 years, traveling from damp ships to dry museums, enduring fluctuations in humidity and temperature that should have reduced them to dust. This longevity is due entirely to the obsessive quality of the stitching you are watching right now. The artisan isn't just making a prop. He is building something meant to last. He uses a technique known as a baseball stitch. Though baseball won't be invented for another few decades, where two needles are used to cross the thread back and forth, creating a seam that is incredibly strong and lies flat against the surface. He pauses to re-thread his needle, his movements practiced and smooth. He wets the end of the silk thread in his mouth, the only moisture in this dry process, and guides it through the eye without a tremor in his hands. You notice the colices on his fingers, thick pads of hardened skin stained dark by charcoal and walnut ink. These are hands that know the resistance of wood and the grain of bone. They are capable, patient hands. He resumes his work, the silence of the room broken only by the faint pop of the needle breaking through the skin and the soft swish of the thread being pulled through. As he works his way around the circumference of the creature, navigating the difficult transition from the monkey's hip to the fish's scales, he encounters a gap. The fit between the two carcasses isn't perfect. Nature never intended these two species to meet, let alone fuse. There is a small, triangular opening where the monkey's torso is slightly wider than the fish's body. A lesser craftsman might just stuff it with rags and paint over it. But this artisan has a different solution. He reaches for a small bowl of water and a strip of dried fish skin he has kept in reserve, a scrap from the original salmon. He soaks the scrap until it is pliable, almost gelatinous. Then, with the precision of a plastic surgeon, he trims it to the exact shape of the gap. He places the patch over the hole, smoothing the edges down with a bone tool until they blend seamlessly with the surrounding skin. He stitches the patch in place, using even tinier stitches, microscopic loops of silk that are practically invisible to the naked eye. When the patch dries, it will shrink and tighten, pulling the seam together until it is as tight as a drum. It is a masterful piece of deception. The rain outside has settled into a steady, comforting drone, a wall of white noise that wraps around the workshop like a blanket. Inside, the light from the lanterns is warm and golden, casting long, soft shadows that dance on the walls as the flames flicker in the draft. The smell of the fish glue is stronger now, warmed by the heat of the brazier. It is a pungent, organic scent, ancient and earthy. It smells of the sea and the forest floor. The artisan reaches the spine. This is the critical structural point. If the creature is to be handled, passed around a dinner table, or jostled in a crate, the spine must be rigid. He takes a piece of stiff wire, likely hammered out by a local blacksmith, and runs it along the back of the creature, bridging the gap between the monkey's vertebrae and the fish's dorsal ridge. He lashes the wire in place with heavy cord, wrapping it tight until it is buried in the groove of the spine. Then he covers the wire with a strip of leather, glued and stitched down to hide the mechanics. Now, the mermaid has a backbone of iron. It will hold its posture for centuries. You watch as he moves to the front of the creature, the belly. Here the transition is most obvious. The monkey has a navel, the fish does not. The artisan decides to accentuate this. He uses his thumb to press a small indentation into the fish skin, just below the joint, creating the suggestion of a continuous abdominal wall. He molds the drying skin, kneading it like dough, forcing the textures to merge. He is sculpting with dead tissue, blurring the line between the two animals until your eye can no longer tell where the fur stops and the scales begin. It is strange to think that this object, born in such quiet concentration, is destined for such noise. It will be shouted about by carnival barkers. It will be argued over in crowded lecture halls. It will be the center of attention in rooms filled with cigar smoke and gaslight. But here, in its creation, there is only peace. The artisan doesn't know about P.T., Barnum, or the Royal Society. He only knows that the tension on the left side is slightly uneven, and he needs to correct it. He picks up a small pair of iron tweezers. He uses them to pluck a few stray hairs from the monkey's chest that are caught in the seam. He wants a clean line. He pulls them out one by one. Pluck, 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 a tiny, rhythmic sound. He blows the loose hairs away. They drift in the air for a moment, catching the light, before settling on the tatami mat. Now comes the most delicate part of the stitching process, the arms. The monkey's arms are currently hanging limp at its sides, looking lifeless and awkward. The artisan wants a pose that evokes emotion. He wants the mermaid to look as if it were frozen in a moment of despair or surprise. He gently bends the dried arms. They are stiff, the joints calcified with age. He moves them slowly, terrified of snapping the brittle bones. Creak, a dry, woody sound as the shoulder joint rotates. He brings the hands up towards the face. He positions the right hand so that it is clutching the side of the head, fingers splayed in a gesture of eternal headache, or perhaps existential dread. He positions the left hand across the chest, resting near where a heart would be. It is a dramatic, almost theatrical pose. To keep the arms in this position, he uses more thread. He stitches the wrist to the cheekbone, a single, hidden loop of silk anchoring the hand to the face. He stitches the elbow to the rib cage. The mermaid is now locked in its pose forever. It looks tortured, mysterious, and undeniably human. The stitching is complete. The artisan sets his needle down. He picks up the creature and holds it at arm's length, turning it slowly in the lantern light. He inspects every inch of the seam. He is looking for gaps, for loose threads, for any sign of the artificer's hand. He finds a small pucker in the skin near the hip. He frowns. He picks up a small hammer, a tiny thing with a head no bigger than a thimble, and gently taps the pucker. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, dull thuds. He flattens the skin against the wooden core. The pucker disappears. He nods. He places the mermaid back on the table. It sits there, a completed form. But it still looks like two things sewn together. The color of the monkey's skin is a dusty brown. The fish is a pale, yellowish gray. The textures are different. The illusion is not yet sold. It needs a unifying layer. It needs skin. The artisan prepares for the next stage. He clears away the scraps of leather and the snipped ends of thread. He sweeps the wood shavings into a small pile. He wipes the table down. He is resetting his workspace, maintaining that meticulous order that defines his craft. He reaches for a stack of paper. It is washi, traditional Japanese paper made from the fibers of the mulberry bush. It is incredibly tough, fibrous, and flexible. He tears the paper into small, irregular strips. He does not cut it. Tearing it leaves a soft, feathered edge that blends better than a sharp cut. He dips his fingers into the bowl of rice paste. It is cool and gooey. He smears a layer of paste over the seam he just stitched. Then he takes a strip of paper and lays it over the glue. He smooths it down with his thumb, working the paper into the texture of the skin. He applies another strip, overlapping the first, and another. He is building up a layer of artificial skin over the stitches, hiding the thread, smoothing the transition. This is papyrem cheche, but refined to an art form. The sound of his wet fingers smoothing the paper is wet and rhythmic. Swish, smooth. Swish, smooth. The paper absorbs the paste and becomes translucent, taking on the color of the skin beneath. He works his way around the waist of the creature, applying a bandage of paper that seals the two halves together. He works slowly, ensuring there are no air bubbles, no wrinkles. The seam vanishes beneath the layer of wet paper. He doesn't stop at the waist. He applies small patches of paper to the monkey's shoulders, building up the muscle mass, making it look more powerful, more aquatic. He adds paper to the neck, thickening it to support the heavy head. He is sculpting now, adding volume where the dried carcass has shriveled away. He is giving the creature back its substance. As he works, the rain outside begins to soften. The heavy drumming fades to a gentle patter, a soft whispering against the roof tiles. The wind dies down. The world is settling into the deep, quiet hours of the night. The workshop feels timeless, a suspended reality where only the movement of the artisan's hands matters. You feel a sense of profound calm watching him. There is no rush to finish. The object will be done when it is done. He finishes applying the paper. The creature is now covered in patches of wet, white mulberry fiber. It looks like it is recovering from a terrible accident, bandaged and fragile. The artisan wipes his hands on a damp cloth, removing the sticky rice paste. He leans back, stretching his spine. A small pop echoes from his back, a human sound in the quiet room. He looks at his work with a critical eye, but there is a softness in his expression. He has birthed a monster, but he treats it with the care of a parent. He reaches for a small bamboo pipe and a pinch of tobacco. He packs the pipe slowly, lights it from the coals of the brazier, and takes a long, slow pull. The smoke curls up, gray and fragrant, mingling with the other scents of the room. He sits there for a moment, just breathing, watching the mermaid dry. In the silence, you can almost hear the paper tightening as the moisture evaporates, the fibers shrinking and pulling the creature into a single, unified whole. The mermaid sits on the wooden table, half monkey, half fish, entirely silent. Its painted eyes stare at nothing. Its stitched hands clutch its face. It is a masterpiece of patient deception, waiting for the final touches that will make it legendary. But for now, it rests. And so do you, lulled by the quiet, the smoke, and the endless, gentle rain. The paper skin has dried now, shrinking tight against the creature's frame, leaving a surface that is pale, patchy, and distinctly artificial. The mermaid currently looks like a bandaged invalid, its seam hidden but its texture all wrong. The artisan taps out his pipe, the ash falling softly into the brazier, and sets it aside. He leans forward again, his shadow stretching across the tatami mat. It is time for the alchemy. It is time to turn paper and dead skin into something ancient and organic. He reaches for a shallow ceramic dish containing a fine, black powder. This is charcoal dust, ground from the same oak that burns in the village fires. Beside it sits another bowl filled with a darker, thicker liquid, persimmon tannin, a natural dye that ferments into a rich, reddish, brown lacquer. It smells sharp, sour, and fermented, a scent that hits the back of your throat like old wine. This is the smell of age. He dips a stiff brush into the tannin and begins to paint the creature. He starts at the head. The liquid soaks into the dried monkey skin, darkening it instantly. The pale, dusty brown transforms into a deep, glossy chestnut. He works the brush into the wrinkles of the face, letting the dye pool in the crevices, accentuating the grimace, the sunken eyes, the hollow cheeks. He paints the paper bandages around the neck and shoulders. The white paper drinks the dye greedily, turning the same color as the skin. The transition begins to blur. The bandages disappear, becoming just another patch of darkened skin. He moves down the torso, painting over the ribs, the sewn arms, the papered waist. The creature is becoming uniform. It is no longer a monkey and a fish. It is a single, brown entity. But color alone is not enough. A mermaid lives in the sea. It needs texture. It needs the crust of salt, the slime of algae, the roughness of scales. He puts down the brush and picks up the charcoal dust. While the tannin is still wet and tacky, he takes a pinch of the black powder between his thumb and forefinger. He sprinkles it over the wet surface. Swish, swish. The dust falls like black snow. It sticks to the wet lacquer, creating a gritty, uneven texture. He blows gently on it to disperse the clumps. The result is instant aging. The smooth paper now looks like rough, weathered hide. It looks like skin that has been cured in salt water for a decade. He doesn't stop there. He applies more lacquer over the charcoal, sealing it in. Then he adds a layer of fine sand to the fish tail, giving the scales a rough, sandpaper quality. He is building up layers of grime and history. He is simulating the accumulation of time. He works with a speed that belies the precision of his choices. A dab of dark lacquer here to simulate a bruise or a patch of rot. A sprinkle of lighter dust there to simulate dried salt. He is painting a biography onto the creature's skin. Historians and art conservators who have raid these mermaids are often surprised by the sheer number of materials involved. They find clay, cloth, wood, wire, and sometimes even scraps of old newspapers used as stuffing. But on the surface, all you see is this unified, crusty texture. It is a texture designed to be touched. The artisan knows that the eventual buyer will want to run a finger along the flank of the beast to see if it feels real. And it will. It will feel rough, dry, and ancient. He reaches the point where the monkey hair meets the fish scales. This is the hardest transition to hide. He takes a small brush and applies the lacquer in tiny strokes, mimicking the direction of the hair. He paints hairs onto the fish scales. Then he paints scales onto the monkey's skin. He blends the two patterns until they merge in a confusing, muddy middle ground where you can't quite tell what you are looking at. It is a visual trick, forcing the brain to accept the continuity because the alternative is too confusing to process. The smell in the workshop has changed. The sharp tang of the tannin dominates, overlaying the fish glue and the rain. It is a heady, intoxicating smell. The artisan's hands are stained dark brown now, his fingernails rimmed with black charcoal. He looks like he has been digging in the earth. He picks up a rag and wipes the excess dye from the high points of the creature. The nose, the knuckles, the ridge of the spine. This reveals the lighter color underneath, creating highlights that make the form pop. It gives the mermaid a three-dimensional depth in the dim light. He pauses to mix a new substance. He takes a small amount of the rice paste and mixes it with white chalk powder until it forms a thick, white putty. He rolls a tiny ball of this putty between his fingers. He places it into the empty eye socket of the monkey. He presses it flat. He does the same for the other eye. The creature now has blank, white eyes staring out from its dark face. But they are too dead. They need a spark. He takes a tiny brush, dipped in the blackest ink, and paints a pupil in the center of each white disc. Then, a stroke of red lacquer around the rim of the eye to suggest inflammation, the irritation of salt water. Finally, he adds a dot of clear varnish to the center of the pupil. A catchlight. Suddenly, the creature looks wet. It looks like it is watching you. The effect is startling, even in this quiet room, with just the artisan and the rain. The sudden presence of those staring eyes changes the energy. The mermaid has woken up. He moves to the mouth. The monkey's teeth are small and dull. He wants them to look sharper. He takes a small file and sharpens the canines, grinding them down to needle points. The sound is a high-pitched rasp. Scree, scree. He paints the gums with a mixture of red ochre and glue, giving them a receding, diseased look. He paints the teeth yellow, staining them to look like they have been gnawing on raw fish. The mouth becomes a focal point of horror, a tiny cavern of sharp edges. The final step of the surfacing process is the varnish. He takes a jar of clear lacquer, derived from the sap of the lacquer tree. It is thick and honey-colored. He applies a thin coat over the entire creature. This will seal all the layers. The paper, the charcoal, the paint, the sand. It will dry to a hard, waterproof shell. But more importantly, it will give the creature a permanent, wet look, even when it is bone dry in a museum case 50 years from now. It will look like it was just pulled from the ocean. He brushes the varnish on with long, smooth strokes. The creature glistens in the lantern light. The dark brown skin shines. The eyes sparkle. The teeth gleam. It looks slimy, slick, and incredibly realistic. The artisan works carefully, ensuring no brush hairs are left behind in the sticky finish. He coats the tail, the fins, the twisted hands. He coats the wooden block that serves as the base, making it look like driftwood. He sets the brush down. The physical work is done. The mermaid sits on the table, shining and wet, a dark jewel of deception. But it is not ready to leave the workshop. It needs to cure. Lacquer takes a long time to dry, especially in this humid weather. It needs to sit in a dust-free environment for days, hardening slowly. The artisan stands up. His knees crack. He walks to a large wooden cabinet in the corner of the room. He opens the doors. Inside, there are shelves lined with clean paper. He clears a space. He returns to the table and picks up the mermaid. He holds it gently by the wooden base, careful not to touch the wet varnish. He carries it across the room. He places it inside the cabinet. The creature sits in the dark, smelling of pine and poison ivy's a relative of the lacquer tree. He closes the doors. The click of the latch is a finality. The creation is finished. He returns to the table and begins to clean. He washes his brushes in a jar of turpentine. The smell is sharp and clean, cutting through the heavy organic scents of the room. He wipes his tools with an oiled rag. He scrapes the dried paste from the mixing bowl. He sweeps the floor. He is erasing the evidence of his work. By morning, the workshop will be clean, ready for the next project. Perhaps a dragon or a two-headed snake. But the mermaid will be hidden away in the dark, hardening, waiting. You watch him extinguish the brazier. He covers the coals with ash, suffocating the fire. The room grows colder. The light dims. He blows out one of the lanterns. Shadows rush in to fill the space. He stands there for a moment in the semi-darkness, listening to the rain. It has slowed to a drizzle now, a soft weeping from the eaves. The scene fades from your mind, replaced by the image of that cabinet in the dark. Inside, the mermaid is undergoing a chemical change. The lacquer is polymerizing, turning into a natural plastic. The skin is tightening. The wood is settling. In the silence of the cabinet, the creature is becoming a fossil before it has even lived. Time jumps forward. The rain has stopped. The seasons have changed. The air is crisp and dry. It is autumn. The cabinet is opened. The mermaid is lifted out. It is hard as stone now, light and rigid. It doesn't smell of varnish anymore. It just smells old. The artisan wraps it in layers of soft cotton. He places it in a wooden box made of paulownia wood, which naturally repels insects and humidity. He packs the box with dried shavings to cushion the journey. He slides the lid of the box shut. He ties it with a woven cord. He picks up a brush and writes characters on the lid in black ink. Ningyo. Mermaid. He does not write monkey. Fish hybrid. He writes the name of the spirit. He is selling the idea, not the materials. You follow the box as it leaves the workshop. It is carried by a runner, slung on a pole across his shoulder, bouncing gently with his stride. It travels through the bustling streets of Edo, past temples and tea-houses, past samurai and merchants. It leaves the city, traveling down the dusty Tokaido road. It crosses rivers on wooden ferries. It climbs mountain passes where the air is thin and cold. It is a long, slow journey to the coast. Eventually, it arrives in Nagasaki, the port city where the foreigners live. The box is delivered to a trading house on the island of Dejima. It sits on a desk in a room that smells of tobacco and coffee. Strange, foreign smells. A man with a red beard and a heavy wool coat opens the box. He is Captain Samuel Eads, an American sailor with an eye for profit. He lifts the mermaid out. He holds it up to the light, coming through the Dutch glass windows. He doesn't see the stitches. He doesn't see the paper patches. He sees a fortune. He sees crowds lining up on Broadway. He sees headlines. He smiles, his teeth yellow in the sunlight. He pays the trader. A massive sum, $6,000 in today's money. The ship's entire operating budget for the month. He is gambling everything on this dried fish. He repacks the mermaid. He places the wooden box inside a larger sea chest, reinforced with iron bands. He locks it with a heavy brass key. The chest is carried out of the trading house, down the stone quay, and loaded onto a launch. You watch as it is rowed out to a waiting ship, a three-masted barkie sitting heavy in the harbor. The ship is called the Pickering. The chest is hoisted aboard in a net. It swings over the rail and thuds onto the deck. Sailors secure it. They carry it down the companionway into the captain's cabin. It is shoved under a bunk, wedged in tight so it won't slide in rough weather. The captain pats the lid of the chest. He pours himself a drink. The ship weighs anchor. The sails drop, catching the wind with a snap. The Pickering turns its bow toward the open ocean. The mermaid is leaving Japan. It will never return. It is beginning a voyage that will take months. A slow crawl across the curvature of the earth. And you are going with it. You are going to spend the next stretch of time in the dark, damp hold of a 19th century sailing ship, listening to the creak of timber and the roar of the sea. You are now a silent passenger on the Pickering, a vessel of oak and canvas moving across the vast, liquid indifference of the world's oceans. The transition from the solid, stationary earth of the Japanese workshop to the constant, fluid motion of the ship is disorienting at first, but soon it settles into a rhythm that becomes the only reality you know. The heavy sea chest containing the Mermaid sits wedged beneath the captain's bunk, secured by thick hemp ropes to prevent it from sliding during the roll of the waves. It is a dark, cramped space, smelling of old leather, dust, and the sharp, metallic tang of the iron bands reinforcing the chest. The journey you are embarking on is not a swift, adventurous dash across the map. It is a slow, grinding marathon of wind and water. In the 19th century, global travel is a matter of patience, a surrender to the elements. There are no engines to hum beneath the floorboards, no propellers to churn the water. There is only the wind, and when the wind dies, the ship stops. You are entering a period of suspension, a long, monotonous pause between the creation of the hoax and its eventual reveal. The ship leaves the green, mountainous coast of Nagasaki behind, slipping out into the East China Sea. The sounds of the harbor, the shouts of stevedores, the ringing of bells, the barking of dogs, fade away, replaced by the singular, overwhelming voice of the ocean. It is a sound that never stops. It is the hiss of water rushing past the hull, the deep, resonant thrum of the wind in the rigging, and the endless, rhythmic creaking of the ship's timbers. Creak, groan, sigh. The ship talks to itself constantly, a wooden orchestra of stress and release as it rides the swells. Captain Eads spends his days in the cabin above the crate. You watch him from the shadows. He is a man of routine, living a life governed by the bells that mark the watches and the noon sighting of the sun. He sits at his small, bolted, down desk, dipping a quill into an inkwell that is suspended on a gimbal to keep it level. He scratches out entries in the logbook. Wind south, south, west, course steady, sea moderate, no sail sighted. The entries are thrillingly boring, a chronicle of nothing happening. He is guarding his investment, likely unaware that the rare specimen beneath his bed is drying out even further in the stuffy air of the cabin. As the ship pushes south, crossing into the tropical latitudes, the temperature in the cabin begins to rise. The air becomes thick and heavy, laden with moisture. The sun beats down on the deck planks overhead, turning the cabin into a slow, cooking oven. You can smell the pine tar in the seams of the deck melting, a rich, acrid scent that mingles with the smell of the captain's stale tobacco smoke. Inside the chest, inside the Polonia box, the Mermaid is baking. The varnish that the artisan applied with such care is hardening into an enamel, like shell. The heat is doing exactly what the museum curators would later desire. It is driving the last molecules of moisture out of the monkey and the fish, mummifying them in the salty air. Historians often debate how much Captain Eads actually knew about the object he had purchased. Did he truly believe it was a biological wonder? Or was he simply a shrewd businessman who recognized a profitable lie when he saw one? Watching him in the quiet hours of the night, as he trims the wick of the oil lamp and stares at the locked chest, you get the sense that he doesn't really care. To him, the Mermaid isn't a scientific discovery, It is a lottery ticket. It is a retirement fund. He treats the chest with the same reverence he would show a crate of gold bullion. The crossing of the Indian Ocean is a test of endurance. For weeks, there is nothing to see through the stern windows but the flat, blue horizon. The ocean is a desert of water. The ship is a tiny splinter of wood floating in a void. Time loses its meaning here. Days bleed into nights. Tuesdays are indistinguishable from Fridays. The only marker of time is the slow change of light moving across the floorboards of the cabin. The sun rises on the port side, tracks across the sky, and sets on the starboard side. The shadows lengthen and contract in a predictable, hypnotic cycle. You find yourself staring at the dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that pierce the gloom of the cabin. They swirl in the draught, tiny galaxies of lint and skin cells, moving in time with the ship's roll. The motion of the vessel is a constant lullaby. It is a gentle side rocking, a cradle motion that makes your eyelids heavy. Even the captain nods off at his desk, his head resting on his charts, lulled by the eternal sway. Sometimes the wind dies completely. The ship enters the doldrums, the equatorial calms where the sea turns to glass and the sails hang limp and useless from the yards. The silence during these times is profound. The creaking stops because the ship isn't moving. The water stops hissing. There is only the occasional slap of a loose rope against a mast. The heat intensifies, becoming a physical weight. The cabin feels like a sauna. You can imagine the mermaid inside its box, warm and dark, the dried fish skin tightening even more, the monkey's grimace becoming more fixed, more permanent. During these long calms, the sailors on deck engage in the slow, quiet work of maintenance. You hear the rhythmic scratch of holystones rubbing the deck planks clean. You hear the low murmur of voices telling stories, tall tales of sea monsters, of giant squids, and yes, of mermaids. It is ironic that while they swap myths about beautiful sirens who lure sailors to their doom, the reality is sitting right beneath their feet, a shriveled, brown grotesque that looks more like beef jerky than a sea goddess. The proximity of the mundane reality to the romantic myth is separated only by a few inches of oak deck planking. The ship eventually catches the trade winds again and rounds the Cape of Good Hope. The air changes instantly. The humidity vanishes, replaced by a sharp, cold dryness. The sea turns a darker, angrier gray. The gentle rocking becomes a more violent pitching. The ship climbs up the face of massive swells and slides down the other side. The chest beneath the bunk strains against its ropes. Thud, thud. It shifts slightly with each roll, the wood of the chest groaning against the wood of the floor. But inside the chest, the mermaid is safe. The shavings of wood that the artisan packed around it act as a shock absorber. It floats in a bed of cedar curls, insulated from the violence of the ocean. It is experiencing the voyage as a series of muffled vibrations. The darkness inside the box is absolute. It is a long, uninterrupted sleep. The captain spends less time at his desk now. He is up on deck, wrapped in heavy oilskins, shouting orders into the wind. The cabin is left empty for long stretches. It becomes cold. You can see your breath in the air. The condensation on the stern windows freezes into delicate, fern-like patterns of frost. The smell of the room changes from tar and sweat to damp wool and cold iron. The lamp swings wildly on its gimbal, casting frantic, leaping shadows that race around the walls. This passage around the tip of Africa is the most dangerous part of the journey, yet it is also the most boring for the cargo. The Mermaid is an inanimate passenger. It does not suffer from seasickness. It does not fear drowning. It simply exists. There is a strange comfort in this passivity. While the living men on board are fighting the elements, straining muscles and fraying nerves, the object of their future fascination is perfectly at peace. It is a stillness in the center of the storm. As the Pickering turns north, entering the Atlantic, the long climb back up the globe begins. The weather softens. The violent pitching settles back into the familiar, rhythmic roll. The captain returns to his desk, looking tired, his face windburned. He checks the chest immediately, testing the ropes, ensuring his prize hasn't broken loose. He seems reassured. He resumes his logbook. Rounded the Cape, heavy seas. Cargo secure. The weeks stretch into months. You watch the water level in the glass carafe on the captain's desk. It tilts left, then right, left, then right, a permanent inclinometer measuring the mood of the ocean. You memorize the grain of the wood on the cabin walls. You know every knot, every scratch, every stain. This is the reality of 19th century travel. It is 99% staring at wood and water. It is a boredom so profound it becomes a form of meditation. You begin to notice the small ecosystems that exist within the ship. A spider spins a web in the corner of the ceiling, a tiny engineer mirroring the work of the rigging outside. A beetle crawls across the floorboards, navigating the treacherous terrain of the shifting deck. These tiny lives play out in silence, ignored by the captain, witnessed only by you and the ghosts of the ship. The food on board changes. The fresh supplies from Nagasaki are long gone. The captain eats salted beef and hardtack, washing it down with watered-down rum. The smell of the food permeates the cabin, a salty, preserved smell that matches the Mermaid perfectly. In a way, the crew and the Mermaid are becoming more alike the longer the voyage continues. Both are being pickled by the sea, dried out by the wind, and preserved by the salt. One afternoon, a new sound breaks the monotony. It is a dull, rhythmic thumping, slower than the heartbeat of a man. It is a whale, rubbing its barnacled flank against the hull of the ship. The captain looks up, startled. He goes to the window. You see the massive gray shape moving through the water, a true monster of the deep. It is magnificent, alive, and powerful. It is the real ocean. And yet, when the ship reaches London, no one will pay to see a whale. They will line up to see the dried, stitched, together lie in the box. It is a testament to human nature that we often prefer a manageable, exciting fate to the overwhelming, indifferent reality of nature. The ship crosses the equator again. The heat returns, then fades as you enter the northern hemisphere. The North Star appears in the window, a steady point of light that signals the approach of home. The water changes color again, shifting from the deep, translucent blue of the mid-Atlantic to a murky, greenish gray. The channel. The smell of the air changes. It no longer smells purely of ozone and salt. There is a new scent on the wind, the smell of coal smoke, of wet earth, of industry. You are approaching England. The motion of the ship changes too. The long, rolling swells of the ocean are replaced by the choppy, confused chop of the coastal waters. The creaking of the timbers becomes shorter, sharper. You hear the sound of seagulls crying overhead. It is a lonely, piercing sound, but it means land is near. The captain is shaving. He has set up a small mirror and is scraping the months of beard growth from his face. He is preparing to re-enter society. He puts on his best coat, the blue wool brushed clean of lint. He looks at the chest one last time. He smiles. He is ready to become a showman. The ship enters the Thames estuary. The view from the window is no longer an empty horizon. You see mudflats, gray and dismal under a cloudy sky. You see other ships, a forest of masts crowding the river. You see barges laden with coal, rowboats darting between the hulls. The silence of the ocean is broken by the roar of civilization. Steam whistles blow. Chains rattle. Men shout. The Pickering slows. The sails are furled, the canvas thundering as it loses the wind. The ship drifts under bare poles, guided by a tugboat. The anchor chain runs out, a deafening, metallic roar that shakes the entire ship. Rattle, 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 TH'd. The ship stops. For the first time in months, the floor beneath your feet is still. The stillness is shocking. It feels wrong. Your body, accustomed to the constant motion, feels like it is still swaying. The captain locks his logbook. He puts the key in his pocket. He calls for his men. 2 sailors enter the cabin, their boots heavy on the wood. They smell of unwashed bodies and relief. They stoop down and untie the ropes securing the chest. They grunt as they lift it. It is heavy, weighted with the wood and the mystery inside. They carry the chest out of the cabin, maneuvering it carefully through the narrow door. You follow them. You leave the gloom of the captain's quarters and step out onto the deck. The sky is low and gray, spitting a fine, cold drizzle that feels very different from the warm rain of Edo. This is London rain. It is acidic, dirty, and cold. The chest is lowered over the side of the ship into a waiting lighter. A small, flat-bottomed boat used to ferry cargo to the docks. The captain climbs down after it. He sits on the chest, claiming ownership, defying anyone to touch it. The lighter pushes off, rowing towards the dark, wet stones of the wharf. You watch the Pickering recede into the fog. The ship has done its job. It was the incubator, the vessel that carried the lie across the world. Now, the Mermaid belongs to the city. The noise of London rises up to meet you. The clatter of carriage wheels on cobblestones, the shouts of street hawkers, the distant ringing of church bells. It is a chaotic, overwhelming wall of sound after the silence of the sea. The lighter bumps against the dock. Thud. The journey is over. The chest is hauled up onto the wet stones. It sits there, a nondescript wooden box amidst barrels of rum and crates of tea. No one looks at it. The dock workers step around it, ignoring it. They have no idea what is inside. They don't know that they are stepping past a creature that will soon be the talk of the town. The captain hails a carriage. The chest is loaded onto the roof. You climb up with it, settling into the damp straw. The carriage lurches forward, the horse's hooves striking sparks against the stones. You are moving through the labyrinth of Victorian London. The gas lamps are just flickering on, casting yellow pools of light in the fog. The buildings loom high and dark on either side, like cliffs of brick and soot. You travel through the East End, past the crowded tenements and the gin palaces. You move towards the wealthier districts, where the streets are wider and the houses have iron railings. The carriage stops in front of a respectable-looking hotel. The chest is unloaded. It is carried into the lobby, past the staring porter, and up the stairs to a private room. The captain tips the porters and closes the door. He is alone with the box. He takes a knife from his pocket and cuts the cord he tied months ago in Nagasaki. He opens the lid. He removes the layer of wood shavings. He reaches in and pulls out the cotton wrapping. You hold your breath. This is the moment of truth. Has the journey ruined? Has the humidity rotted the skin? Has the glue failed? He peels back the cotton. The mermaid lies there, nestled in the shavings. It looks exactly as it did in the workshop. If anything, it looks better. The varnish has hardened to a glass-like finish. The skin is tighter, more skeletal. The eyes stare up at the ceiling of the London hotel room with the same accusatory glare they held in Japan. It has survived. The captain laughs, a short, sharp bark of triumph. He sets the mermaid on the velvet coverlet of the bed. It looks ridiculous against the floral pattern. A dried sea monster on a Victorian duvet. The contrast is perfect. He pours himself a glass of brandy. He sits in the armchair and watches the mermaid. He is planning. He is thinking about flyers, about newspaper advertisements, about ticket prices. He is thinking about the story he will tell. He won't tell them about the quiet workshop or the glue. He will tell them about a perilous capture in the Fiji Islands. He will tell them about nets and struggles and ancient curses. But you know the truth. You know the silence of its creation and the silence of its journey. You know that its soul, if it has one, is made of cedar shavings and rice paste. The room is warm, heated by a coal fire in the grate. The light is soft. The sounds of the city are muffled by the heavy curtains. The mermaid waits. It is ready for its debut. It is ready to be misunderstood. The morning light in London does not break. It leaks. It seeps into the city like grey water through a cracked ceiling, filtering through a suspension of coal smoke and river fog that hangs over the streets in a permanent, suffocating embrace. You are standing outside a respectable establishment in Piccadilly, a building of brown brick and heavy curtains, watching the city wake up. It is a slow, reluctant awakening. The street sweepers are out, pushing the mud into piles with rhythmic, scraping strokes. The delivery carts rattle by, their drivers huddled under oilskins, the horses' breath steaming in the damp air. You are here, because the mermaid is here. The wooden chest has been moved from the hotel room to this more professional setting. A private parlor rented specifically for a quiet, scientific unveiling. The captain knows that to sell a ticket to the common man, he first needs the nod of the gentleman. He needs the seal of approval from men who have letters after their names and time on their hands. He needs the press. And so, the invitations have been sent out. Thick cream, colored cards delivered by hand to the offices of the Times, to the Royal College of Surgeons, and to the various clubs where old men sit in leather chairs and discuss the boundaries of the known world. You slip inside the building. The transition from the cold, wet street to the interior is a sensory shock. The air here is warm, dry, and smells intensely of furniture polish, old paper, and stale cigar smoke. It is the smell of Victorian authority. You walk down a hallway lined with dark wood paneling, your footsteps sinking into a runner of Turkish carpet. There is a hushed quality to this place, a library, like silence that demands a lowered voice and a slow pace. At the end of the hall, a door stands ajar. You enter the parlor. A fire is roaring in the grate, the coal shifting and settling with soft, crumbling sounds. The light in the room comes from the fire, and a series of gas sconces on the walls, which hiss gently, casting a warm, yellow glow that reflects off the polished mahogany tables. In the center of the room, on a large table draped in green baize, the same fabric used for billiard tables, sits the mermaid. It has been removed from its box. It rests on a velvet cushion, looking small, brown, and incredibly dry. In this setting, surrounded by heavy furniture and serious architecture, it looks even more alien than it did in the workshop. It looks like a relic from a forgotten tomb. The captain is there, standing in the corner, looking less like a sailor and more like a nervous curator. He is waiting. Then the guests begin to arrive. They do not burst in. They trickle in, one by one, shaking their umbrellas in the hallway, handing their top hats to a silent attendant. These are the gentlemen of London's scientific and journalistic fringe. They are men with sideburns that bristle like brushes, men who wear waistcoats tight across their stomachs and spectacles perched on the ends of their noses. They carry the weight of the British Empire in their posture, a confidence that they can explain, categorize, and own anything they encounter. You watch them approach the table. They circle it warily at first, like predators assessing a strange new animal. They lean in, their hands clasped behind their backs, their faces illuminated by the gaslight. The silence in the room deepens, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the heavy breathing of a man with a particularly tight collar. One of the men, a naturalist with a reputation for skepticism, produces a magnifying glass from his pocket. The brass rim glints in the firelight. He leans over the mermaid, bringing the glass down until it is almost touching the creature's skin. You look through the lens with him. You see the magnified texture of the dried skin, the craters, the wrinkles, the tiny fissures where the varnish has settled. You see the scales of the fish tail, enlarged to the size of thumbnails, showing the delicate ridges of their growth rings. He moves the glass to the midsection, to the place where the monkey meets the fish. This is the moment of danger. This is where the artisan's work is put to the test. The naturalist squints. He is looking for a stitch, a seam, a smear of glue. But he finds nothing. The paper skin, painted and textured with charcoal and lacquer, holds the illusion perfectly. The transition looks organic. It looks like a biological anomaly, a freak of nature where mammal and reptile fused in the womb. The naturalist straightens up, exhaling a puff of air that smells of peppermint and tea. He wipes the lens of his glass with a silk handkerchief. He looks at his colleagues. He shakes his head, not in denial, but in confusion. He cannot explain it. And because he cannot explain it, he is intrigued. Another man steps forward. He is a writer for a popular gazette. He doesn't care about the biology. He cares about the narrative. He takes out a notebook and a pencil. You hear the scratch of graphite on paper. Scritch, 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 a dry, frantic sound. He is noting the expression on the mermaid's face. He writes down words like agony, human-like, despair. He is anthropomorphizing the dried monkey, projecting human emotions onto its frozen grimace. He notes the way the hands are clutched to the face, interpreting it as a final scream against the dying of the light, rather than a wire armature bent by a Japanese craftsman. The room begins to fill with a low murmur of conversation. It is a polite, restrained sound, a drone of baritone voices discussing anatomy. They point at the ribs. They argue about the number of vertebrae. They debate whether such a creature could breathe air or if it was purely aquatic. You listen to their theories, and there is a wonderful, sleepy irony to it all. They are using the language of science, Latin names, anatomical terms, logical deductions, to analyze a hoax. They are building a castle of logic on a foundation of sand. One gentleman, bolder than the rest, asks permission to touch it. The captain nods, feigning a lack of concern. The gentleman reaches out a gloved hand. He runs a finger along the flank of the fish. He expects it to be soft, perhaps, or slimy. But it is hard. It is rock hard, like varnished wood. He taps it with his fingernail. Tick, tick. The sound is sharp and hollow. Desiccated, he murmurs. Completely desiccated. He touches the hair on the monkey's head. It is brittle, stiff with old glue and dust. It feels like dry grass. He touches the teeth. They are sharp, filing the skin of his glove. He pulls his hand back, as if bitten. The tactile experience confirms the visual one. The object is real in the sense that it is a physical, tangible thing. It occupies space. It has texture. It is not a painting or a story. It is a corpse. And corpses, generally speaking, are considered evidence. The atmosphere in the room shifts from skepticism to a sort of collective reverence. They have decided, as a group, that this object is significant. It appeals to their Victorian love of the macabre and the exotic. It fits into their worldview that the globe is full of monsters waiting to be catalogued by Englishmen. A waiter enters the room, moving silently across the carpet. He carries a silver tray with crystal glasses and a decanter of sherry. The amber liquid catches the firelight, glowing like the varnish on the mermaid's skin. The gentlemen take their drinks. They sip. The room warms up. The skepticism melts away, replaced by the warm buzz of alcohol and discovery. You find yourself lulled by the scene. It is a tableau of brown and gold. Brown wood, brown sherry, brown mermaid, gold frames, gold watch chains, gold firelight. It is a monochromatic study in comfort. There is no rush here. The mermaid isn't going anywhere. The questions aren't going to be answered today. The captain begins to spin his tale. He speaks softly, his voice rough with the memory of salt water. He tells them he bought it from a fishing boat in the Moluccas. He tells them the natives were terrified of it. He tells them he intends to take it to the United States to show it to the great naturalists there. He plays hard to get. He implies that he is doing them a favor by letting them see it at all. The journalists scribble faster. The naturalists nod sagely. They are hooked. They are already composing their headlines. The siren of the South Seas. A new species discovered. The link between man and fish. As the afternoon wears on, the fog outside thickens, pressing against the window panes, turning the day into a premature twilight. The gas lamps hiss louder. The fire burns down to glowing embers. The gentlemen begin to drift away, one by one. They retrieve their hats and coats. They step back out into the cold London mist, their heads full of wonder, ready to spread the virus of curiosity throughout the city. The room empties. The captain is left alone with his prize. He smiles a slow, tired smile. He covers the mermaid with a cloth, not to protect it, but to hide it again. He knows that scarcity creates value. He pours himself the last of the sherry. But the story doesn't end in this private room. This was just the dress rehearsal. The real performance requires a bigger stage. A few days later, You find yourself in a different part of the city. You are walking towards the Egyptian Hall in Piccadilly, a building that looks like a temple to a forgotten god, with towering columns and hieroglyphs carved into the stone facade. It is a place of spectacle, a venue for panoramas, freaks and wonders. The buzz has started. The articles have been published. The sketches have appeared in the papers. The city is whispering about the Fiji Mermaid. The name has been tweaked, exoticized. Fiji sounds far away, dangerous, tropical. It sounds like a place where monsters might live. You watch as the preparation for the public exhibition begins. It is a slow, methodical process of set dressing. The captain, or rather, the showman who has taken over the operation, knows that presentation is everything. They don't just put the mermaid on a table. They build a shrine. You are inside the exhibition hall. It is a cavernous space, echoing and cold. Workmen are constructing a display case. You hear the sawing of wood and the hammering of nails. Thud, thud. They are building a high platform, draped in dark velvet. They want the mermaid to be at eye level, forcing the viewer to look it in the face. They arrange the lighting. In the days before electric spotlights, this means positioning gas jets and reflectors to cast the most dramatic shadows possible. They want the mermaid to look menacing, not pathetic. They adjust the mirrors. They tweak the angles. You see them unpacking other crates. To sell the lie, they need context. They surround the mermaid with other specimens, dried platypuses, another creature that looks like a hoax but is real, preserved flying fish, strange shells, paddles from the South Seas. They are creating a narrative of exploration. They are building a world where the mermaid makes sense. The hall smells of sawdust and unwashed fabric. It is the smell of the theater, of backstage magic. You sit in the empty gallery, watching the dust motes dance in the shafts of light that pierce the gloom. It is peaceful here, before the crowds arrive. It is the quiet before the storm of commerce. You notice a poster being pasted up on the wall outside. It shows a woodcut of the mermaid. In the drawing, she is beautiful. She has long, flowing hair, a voluptuous torso, and is holding a comb. She looks like a goddess. You look back at the dried monkey, fish on the velvet cushion. The contrast is laughable, but it is also brilliant. The poster sells the dream. The object provides the gritty, disappointing reality that somehow makes it feel more authentic. If it were beautiful, people would think it was a doll. Because it is ugly, they think it must be real. The doors are set to open the next morning. The ticket booth is ready. The brass rail is polished. The velvet ropes are strung. The city of London is about to be invited in to stare at a dead monkey. Night falls over Piccadilly. The workmen leave. The hall is locked. You are left alone in the dark with the collection. The gaslights are turned down to a blue peep. The shadows stretch out, long and distorted. The mermaid sits in its glass case, staring into the darkness. In the silence of the empty hall, you can almost imagine the life this creature never had. You can imagine it swimming through coral reefs, its monkey hands catching fish, its tail propelling it through the blue water. It is a ghost story invented by a carpenter and sold by a sailor. But in the quiet of the night, even a lie feels like it has a soul. You hear the distant rumble of a carriage passing on the street outside. The vibration travels through the floorboards, shaking the glass case ever so slightly. The mermaid shudders. It is a tiny movement, Just a vibration, but it makes the shadows on its face shift. For a second, it looks like it is grimacing in pain. Then the carriage fades, and the stillness returns. You drift through the hall, looking at the other exhibits. The platypus looks ridiculous with its duck bill and beaver tail. Nature, you realize, is often just as absurd as the fakes. The line between what is real and what is manufactured is blurry, especially here, in the dark, where everything is just a silhouette. The air in the hall is cold. You wrap your coat tighter around yourself. You find a bench in the corner, out of the draft. You settle in. The rhythm of the city outside is slowing down. The shouts of the street sellers are gone. The traffic has thinned. London is going to sleep, but the mermaid is awake. It is always awake. Its painted eyes never close. It watches the empty hall, guarding its secret. You think about the artisan back in Japan. Is he sleeping now? Is he dreaming of the thing he made? Does he know that his creation is sitting in a glass box in London, about to become the most famous object in the world? Probably not. He is likely working on his next piece, carving another block of wood, oblivious to the destiny of his last one. The connection between that quiet, rainy workshop and this cold, echoing hall is invisible. A thread of silk and glue that stretches across the world. And you have followed that thread all the way here. The grandfather clock in the lobby chimes the hour. It is a deep, resonant sound. Bong, bong, bong. It echoes through the high ceilings. Midnight. The day of the exhibition has arrived. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the fading echoes of the bell. You feel a heavy, pleasant drowsiness. The anticipation of the crowd is for tomorrow. Tonight, there is only the quiet curiosity of the empty room. The gaslight flickers. A draught from a window rattles a loose pane. Tink, tink. The sounds are small, intimate. They ground you in the physical reality of the space. You are not in a history book. You are in a room. A room with a floor, a ceiling, and a dead mermaid. You open your eyes and look at the case one last time. The varnish catches the blue light of the gas jet. The mermaid gleams. It is a star waiting for its audience. The sun rises over London, but you wouldn't know it inside the Egyptian hall. Here, the atmosphere is perpetually curated, a twilight world of gaslight and shadow designed to make the mundane seem miraculous. The doors open with a heavy, rusted groan, and the silence of the night is shattered by the arrival of the public. They spill in from the foggy streets of Piccadilly, a motley collection of top hats, bonnets, flat caps, and shawls. They smell of damp wool, coal smoke, and cheap tobacco. They are noisy, jostling, and eager to be deceived. You stand in the back of the hall, leaning against a cold stone pillar, watching the spectacle unfold. It is a slow, motion stampede of curiosity. They have paid their shilling, a significant sum for many of them, and they want their money's worth. They push towards the velvet, draped platform in the center of the room, their boots shuffling on the wooden floorboards, creating a low, rhythmic roar like the ocean the mermaid supposedly came from. The room warms up quickly with the body heat of hundreds of people. The air grows thick and humid, fogging the glass of the display cases. The smell of the crowd mingles with the smell of the gas lamps. A distinct, slightly sulfurous scent that catches in the back of your throat. It is a sensory soup of Victorian humanity. You can hear the rustle of crinoline dresses, the murmur of hushed conversations, the occasional cough. and the sharp cry of a child who is either terrified or bored. At the center of it all, illuminated by a carefully positioned array of gas jets, sits the mermaid. It is the eye of the hurricane. It hasn't moved. It hasn't changed. It is still the same dried, brown object you watched come together in the workshop. But the context has transformed it. It is no longer a craft project. It is now an idol. The crowd presses against the brass rail. They stare. They squint. They whisper. Look at the hands, a woman says, clutching her shawl tighter. They look just like a child's hands. It's the teeth for me, her companion replies, shuddering. Nasty little things. I read in the paper it was caught in a net off the coast of Fiji. A man explains to his son, pointing with the stem of his pipe. Fought like a tiger, they said. Screeched like a banshee. You listen to the stories they invent. They are doing the work for the showman. They are filling in the blanks. The mermaid is a blank canvas upon which they project their fears and fantasies. They see what they want to see. They see a monster from the deep, a missing link, a proof of God's infinite variety. They do not see the stitches. They do not see the paper. They do not see the cedar wood plug. The showman, P.T. Barnum, has now entered the picture, leasing the exhibit from the captain. Moves through the crowd like a shark in a school of fish. He is a master of the soft sell. He doesn't shout, he suggests. He plants doubt. He has hired men to stand in the crowd and argue. It's a fake. One man shouts, clearly a plant. It's a monkey sewn to a fish. Nonsense. Another plant retorts. Look at the spine. Look at the continuity of the scales. No man could forge that. The crowd loves the conflict. They turn their heads back and forth like spectators at a tennis match. The debate makes it more real. If people are arguing about it, it must be important. It validates their investment. They lean closer to the glass, trying to decide for themselves. They become amateur detectives, looking for the seam. But the artisan's work is too good. The varnish holds. The lacquer hides all sins. You watch a young artist sketching the mermaid in a notepad. He is drawing it with exaggerated features, larger eyes, sharper teeth, a more dynamic pose. His drawing will appear in the Illustrated London News next week, and it will be even further removed from reality. The image of the mermaid is mutating, evolving as it travels through the public consciousness. It is becoming a meme, a cultural virus spreading through ink and gossip. The noise in the room is a constant, low-frequency hum. It is a sleepy sound, actually, a drone of voices that blurs into white noise. If you close your eyes, it sounds like a swarm of bees. You feel the vibration of it in the floorboards. The room is a hive, and the mermaid is the queen. Hours pass. The light from the skylights fades as the afternoon wears on, leaving the gas lamps to do the heavy lifting. The shadows in the room grow longer, more dramatic. The mermaid looks more sinister in the failing light. The hollows of its eyes seem deeper. The grimace seems more pronounced. People begin to leave, their curiosity sated, their shillings spent. They drift back out into the London night, carrying the memory of the creature with them. They will tell their friends. They will tell their children. I saw a mermaid once, they will say. It was ugly as sin, but it was real. The hall empties slowly. The janitors appear with their brooms, sweeping up the debris of the day. Ticket stubs, dropped handkerchiefs, dust. The sound of the brooms, swish, 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 is a rhythmic counterpoint to the earlier noise. The gaslights are dimmed one by one. The heat dissipates. The room grows cold again. You walk up to the glass case. The glass is smeared with greasy fingerprints and nose prints, the physical residue of thousands of stares. You look through the smudges at the creature. It looks tired. Being a celebrity is exhausting, even for a dead monkey. The next phase of its life is a blur of travel. You follow the Mermaid as it leaves London. It crosses the Atlantic again, this time to New York. It is installed in Barnum's American Museum on Broadway. The setting is different, louder, brash, more American. But the reaction is the same. The crowds come. They stare. They believe. You watch it sit in a case in Boston, in Philadelphia, in Charleston. It travels by train now. You hear the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the wheels on the iron rails. The vibration shakes the box, loosening a few flakes of dried skin, a few grains of sand. The Mermaid is slowly disintegrating, shaken apart by the march of progress. It spends years on the road. It becomes a veteran of the sideshow circuit. It shares billing with bearded ladies, giants, and conjoined twins. It sits in dusty tents at county fairs, listening to the Colliope music and the shouts of the barkers. It sits in dime museums, surrounded by wax figures and two-headed calves. The varnish begins to crack. The paper skin starts to peel. The wire in the arm rusts, leaving a small orange stain on the chest. The Mermaid is aging. It is losing its luster. The crowds get smaller. The novelty wears off. People have seen it. They know the trick now. Science is advancing. Darwin publishes his book. People start to understand biology better. They look at the Mermaid, and they don't see a wonder. They see a taxidermy project. Eventually, the Mermaid is retired. It is taken off display. It is put back in a box. Not the nice Polonia box from Japan. That was lost years ago. But a rough pine crate packed with straw. It is shoved into a storage room in the basement of a museum. You stand in that basement. It is dark, damp, and smells of mold and rot. It is quiet here. The noise of the crowds is a distant memory. The only sound is the dripping of a leaky pipe. Plip, 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 and the scuttling of rats in the walls. The Mermaid sits in the dark. It is forgotten. The world has moved on. It has new monsters now. Machines, wars, electricity. The little brown goblin from Edo is no longer scary. It is just junk. But in the silence of the storage room, you can appreciate it for what it really is. It is a survivor. It has traveled further than most humans ever will. It has been worshipped and ridiculed. It has lived a dozen different lives. And now, it finally gets to rest. You watch the dust settle on the lid of the crate. It accumulates slowly, layer by gray layer, burying the memory of the Mermaid. Time is the ultimate curator. It archives everything eventually. Years turn into decades. The museum burns down. Or maybe it moves. The records are lost. The crate is moved to a warehouse, then to a university attic. It becomes a misc specimen. A student finds it 50 years later. They open the box. They laugh. Look at this. They say, a fake mermaid. They put it on a shelf in a laboratory. It sits between a jar of formaldehyde containing a pig fetus and a skeleton of a cat. It is back in the realm of science, but as a curiosity, a footnote in the history of fraud. You stand in the laboratory. It is clean, white, and sterile. The lights are fluorescent, buzzing with a high-pitched electrical hum. The air smells of antiseptic. The Mermaid looks out of place here. It looks too organic, too handmade. It belongs in the rain and the gaslight. The student picks it up. They handle it carelessly. A piece of the tail breaks off. Snap! It falls to the floor. They sweep it up and throw it in the bin. The mermaid is diminishing. It is returning to dust. But even now, broken and dusty, it holds a certain power. When the lights are turned off in the lab and the students go home, the mermaid sits there in the blue glow of the exit sign. The shadows soften its edges. The cracks disappear. For a moment in the silence, it looks like it did in the workshop. It looks like a secret. You realize that the boring history of this object is actually a story about us. It's about our need to believe in magic, our need to be tricked, our need to stare at the unknown. The mermaid didn't trick us. We tricked ourselves. We did all the work. The artisan just gave us the prop. The cycle is complete. The creature that was born in a quiet room in Japan has returned to a quiet room in the West. The noise is gone. The journey is over. There is only the stillness of the object, waiting out eternity. You feel a profound sense of closure. The long, slow arc of the mermaid's life has landed. It is a soft landing. There is no tragedy here, just the gentle erosion of time. The mermaid is safe. It is asleep. And soon you will be too. The gaslights of the 19th century eventually burn down to their final embers, flickering out as the world moves toward the harsh, steady hum of electricity. But before the mermaid can settle into its final, dusty rest, it must survive one last, chaotic purgatory. You are standing on Broadway in New York City, but the year is now 1865. The air is filled with a different kind of smoke than the usual coal smog. It is the acrid, choking smoke of burning history. Barnum's American Museum, the cathedral of curiosity that housed the mermaid for so many years, is on fire. You watch from the safety of the cobblestone street as the flames consume the building. It is a slow, majestic destruction. The fire eats through the roof, sending plumes of sparks spiraling up into the night sky like reverse snow. Inside, the collection is dying. You can imagine the wax figures in the Hall of Presidents melting, their features softening and dripping away like tears. You can imagine the stuffed birds in the aviary catching fire, their feathers flashing into ash in a single instant. The whales in their tanks are boiling in the water that was meant to sustain them. It is a tragic, silent scream of artifacts returning to the carbon from which they came. But amidst the confusion, amidst the shouting firemen pumping water from steam-powered engines, a few things are saved. Men rush into the smoke-filled lobby, grabbing whatever they can carry. They are not acting on scientific value. They are acting on instinct, grabbing the strange, the shiny, the portable. And somewhere in that chaotic exodus, a box is grabbed. Maybe it was the captain's original chest, or perhaps a newer, lighter crate. It is hauled out into the street, dumped onto a pile of salvaged goods near St. Paul's Chapel. The mermaid sits there in the open air, surrounded by the debris of the disaster. It is safe, but it is homeless. The water from the fire hoses rains down on the street, turning the dust to mud. The mermaid gets wet again, but this is not the clean salt spray of the ocean. It is the dirty, sooty runoff of a city in distress. The varnish, tough as it is, repels the water. The creature survives the fire just as it survived the ocean, by being hard, small, and easily overlooked. This is the turning point where the mermaid stops being a celebrity and starts being a refugee. For the next few decades, its history becomes murky, a series of dark rooms and temporary lodgings. It is moved from one warehouse to another. It survives a second fire at Barnum's new location in 1868, another narrow escape that adds a layer of soot to its skin. It is sold, perhaps, or donated, or simply left behind and reclaimed. It drifts through the late Victorian era like a ghost, haunting the margins of the show business world that is slowly forgetting it. Eventually, the noise stops completely. The carnival barkers fall silent. The posters rot away on the billboards. The Mermaid finds its way to a new kind of sanctuary, one far removed from the screaming crowds of Broadway. It arrives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It enters the hallowed, quiet halls of the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology at Harvard University. The transition is jarring in its stillness. You walk with the crate up the stone steps of the museum. The air here smells of old brick, ivy, and floor wax. It is the smell of serious, academic study. There is no popcorn here, no sawdust, no cheap gin. There is only the hush of the library and the slow, methodical work of preservation. The Mermaid is no longer a Fiji mermaid, a monster to be feared. It is now an object. It is an artifact of 19th century folklore. It has been reclassified. You watch as a curator opens the crate. He is a man with white gloves and a gentle touch. He does not gasp in horror. He does not marvel at the biology. He sighs, perhaps recognizing the tedious work ahead. He lifts the Mermaid out. It is lighter now than it was in Edo. Decades of drying have turned the wood and skin into something as light as balsa. The varnish has darkened, turning almost black in places. The monkey's face is covered in a fine layer of gray dust, settling in the eye sockets and the open mouth. The curator places it on a clean table. He measures it with a wooden ruler. Length of 52 centimeters. He writes this down in a large, leather-bound ledger. The sound of his pen scratching on the paper is the loudest thing in the room. Scritch, scratch. He describes it in dry, clinical terms. Composite construct. Simian upper, piscine lower. Wire armature. Pigment, lacquer. The magic is stripped away, replaced by data. He takes a small tag, made of acid-free paper, and ties it to the Mermaid's tail with a piece of cotton string. He writes a number on the tag 97397-72553. This is its new name. It is no longer a spirit of the ocean. It is a number in a filing system. The string looks stark and white against the dark, fossilized scales of the fish. This act of tagging is the final taming of the beast. It has been catalogued. It has been filed. You follow the curator as he carries the Mermaid into the storage archives. This is a place few people ever see. It is a labyrinth of metal shelving units, rolling on tracks, packed floor to ceiling with the debris of human history. There are rows of woven baskets from the Amazon, shelves of ceramic masks from New Guinea, drawers filled with stone arrowheads from the plains of America. It is a dormitory for sleeping things. He finds an empty spot on a shelf in the section dedicated to Pacific curiosities. He clears a little space between a dusty grass skirt and a wooden war club. He lays the Mermaid down. He places a sheet of acid-free tissue paper over it, tucking the edges in like a parent tucking a child into bed. The tissue crinkles softly, a dry, whispering sound. He slides the drawer shut. Clack! You are left in the dark with the Mermaid. The lights in the archive are on a timer. They click off, plunging the rows of shelves into a heavy, velvety blackness. The silence here is absolute. It is a silence that has weight. It presses against your ears. There is no traffic noise from the street outside. There is no wind. There is only the slow, molecular decay of 10,000 old objects. In this darkness, the mermaid finally rests. It has no job to do anymore. It doesn't have to scare anyone. It doesn't have to make anyone rich. It just has to exist. You can imagine it lying there under its tissue paper shroud, its painted eyes staring up at the bottom of the shelf above it. It is surrounded by other spirits, other gods that have been reduced to museum numbers. They are a community of the forgotten, trading silent stories in the dark. Decades pass in this stillness. The world outside changes unrecognizable. Cars replace horses. Planes fly overhead, their engines a distant drone that barely penetrates the thick brick walls of the museum. The internet is invented, creating a new way to spread hoaxes, making the physical deception of the mermaid seem quaint and analog. But inside the drawer, time moves at a different speed. It moves in the accumulation of dust, in the slow yellowing of the tag, in the gradual stiffening of the cotton string. Occasionally, a researcher comes to visit. You see the drawer slide open. Light floods in, blindingly bright after years of darkness. A face peers down, a student writing a thesis on Victorian oddities. They take a photo. Click. The flash illuminates the monkey's grimace for a split second, freezing it in a burst of white light. Then the drawer slides shut again. The darkness returns. The mermaid goes back to sleep. In the late 20th century, technology catches up with the artisan's secret. You watch as the mermaid is taken out for a special appointment. It is carried to a medical facility, not for surgery, but for imaging. It is placed on the cold, plastic table of a CT scanner. The machine whirs to life, a high-pitched, spinning hum that sounds like a spaceship. Whirr, click, whirr. Invisible beams of radiation pass through the dried skin and the lacquer. On a computer screen in the next room, the truth is finally revealed in glowing grayscale slices. You see the ghost inside the machine. You see the wooden block the artisan carved in the rainy workshop in Edo. You see the wire he twisted to pose the arms. You see the nails, the pins, the hidden void where the monkey's organs used to be. You see the interface where the fish spine meets the cedar plug. It is a map of the lie. The technicians nod. They point at the screen. Look at that. They whisper. Bamboo rods in the arms. Clay filling in the neck. The mystery is solved, dissected by digital eyes. There is no magic left. Only engineering. But strangely, this doesn't diminish the mermaid. It elevates it. Seeing the care, the complexity of the construction, makes you respect the artisan even more. It wasn't just a scam, it was a sculpture. It was a piece of problem-solving art made of bone and wood. The mermaid is returned to its shelf. It feels lighter now, as if the weight of the secret has been lifted. It settles back into the dust. The tissue paper is replaced. The tag is straightened. The drawer is closed. You stand in the aisle of the archive, surrounded by the smell of camphor and old paper. You realize that this is the best possible ending for the creature. It wasn't thrown in the trash. It wasn't burned. It was saved. It is cherished in its own dry, quiet way. It has achieved a kind of immortality. As long as the museum stands, as long as the catalogue numbers are recorded, the mermaid will exist. It is a permanent resident of the human memory. The air in the archive is cool and still. Dust motes hang suspended in the air, refusing to settle. You feel a deep, heavy relaxation spreading through your limbs. The story is over. The journey from the ocean to the workshop, to the ship, to the show, and finally to the shelf is complete. The circle is closed. You look at the row of metal cabinets stretching away into the gloom. They look like mausoleums, but friendly ones. They are the guardians of things that have finished their work. There is a comfort in knowing that things are kept, that nothing is truly lost, just filed away. The mermaid is sleeping. The monkey is sleeping. The fish is sleeping. The artisan who made them is long gone, his name forgotten, but his hands are here, preserved in the stitches and the lacquer. The captain is gone. Barnum is gone. The crowds are gone. There is only the shelf, the tag, and the dark. You lean against the metal shelving. The metal is cool against your shoulder. You listen to the silence. It is a deep, restorative silence. It is the sound of history stopping to catch its breath. It is the sound of a job well done. You can leave it here. You can walk away and leave the mermaid to its rest. It doesn't need you anymore. It has its number. It has its place. It is safe. Now, the wind down. The heavy metal door of the archive clicks shut behind you, sealing the silence inside. You step out into the hallway, where the light is dim and the air is still. The story of the mermaid has finally come to a halt, parked safely in the quiet dark of a drawer. It's a strange comfort, isn't it? To think that after all that noise, all that travel, and all those staring eyes, the end of the journey is just a soft bed of tissue paper and a long, uninterrupted sleep. Everything eventually finds its place to rest. The dust settles on the shelves. The varnish hardens. The memories fade into the gentle gray of history. Just like the mermaid, you don't need to perform anymore. You don't need to be interesting or busy or convincing. You can just be. You can let the wires and the structures that hold you up all day soften and relax. You can let the tension in your shoulders unspool like a loose thread. The storm outside the workshop in Edo has stopped. The waves of the Indian Ocean have flattened into a glassy calm. The fire in London has burned down to cool ash. The world is quiet. The lights are dimming, one by one, down the long corridor of the night. There is nothing left to see, nothing left to stitch together. There is only the dark, warm and wrapping around you like a heavy blanket. So let your eyes close. Let the image of the dusty shelf fade away. Let the number on the tag dissolve. You are safe in the quiet. You are drifting in the calm waters of your own rest. Deep, slow, and steady.